Do you ever just find yourself obsessed with a series that literally nobody else cares about? Something so bottom of the barrel and obscure that most people don't even know it exists, but you just have this massive burning passion for it? I tend to be like this with a lot of media I enjoy, as looking for small indie projects, whether it be movies, games, web series, is a hobby of mine that I love to partake in. With movies especially, I absolutely adore going down the rabbit hole of hunting for whatever weird schlocky B-movies I can find from the 80s and 90s and learning everything I can about them. And no franchise shows this side of me better than Critters. If you haven't heard of Critters, then I do not blame you for a second. The series slipped into obscurity very early on in its lifespan, showing up in theaters, getting a bunch of sequels, and then just seemingly vanishing off the face of the earth. I first discovered these movies years ago when I had found myself hyper-fixated on the Gremlins franchise, wanting to experience any and all movies that were even close to capturing the same energy those films did. And at first glance, Critters appeared to be exactly that. These movies, when viewed from the outside, look to be nothing more than Gremlins knockoffs. The cover shows us a group of freaky-looking fuzzy monsters, the title feels super derivative, and the year it was released seems to line up well enough that this was just made to be a quick cash grab. However, the more I looked into these movies, the more of a fascinating rabbit hole they became. First of all, this supposed cheap knockoff of Gremlins actually made bank when it came out. The film was made for a small budget of $2 million and raked in almost 7 times that amount at the US box office. This alone piqued my interest as I wanted to know what it was that made this movie so special, and actually watching it for the first time, I can absolutely see why. If you thought Gremlins was a crazy movie, then oh my god, you are not even close to being ready for Critters. This franchise is the most ridiculous horror movie rabbit hole I have ever gone down, both for the insane nature of the movies themselves, but also for the ridiculous elements that actually went into making them. Critters became such a massive obsession for me that I absolutely had to make this video because I needed some way to express the sheer amount of useless Critter knowledge that I've accumulated over the last couple weeks. Just like I did with my zombie movie marathon, I got together a large group of friends in a VC and we watched all of these movies back to back with one another, recording our live reactions as we went. This was an insane ride for me as the only movie I had seen for years was the original, so just like everyone else around me, I got to experience the rest of what is now one of my favorite franchises of all time and totally blind. I hope you're ready for one of the strangest videos I'm ever going to make because I promise that this will absolutely be up there by the end of this video. So, if you're ready, let's delve into the strange world that is the Critters franchise. Starting things off, we have the film that started the weirdest hyperfixation I've ever had, Critters from 1986. Like I said at the start of this video, the original Critters is such an enigma to me. This movie made a ridiculous amount of money on release, justifying the creation of several sequels afterwards and creating a franchise out of what seems like nothing but a simple Gremlins knockoff at first glance. And speaking of it being a Gremlins knockoff, that's where the story behind this movie gets even weirder. Because the thing about this movie is, the earliest drafts of its script were actually created in 1982, a whole 2 years before the original Gremlins had even come out. In fact, on multiple occasions, the film's director, Stephen Herek, went as far as saying that the movie had experienced several rewrites after the release of Gremlins for the purpose of stopping any and all comparisons from being made. In truth, the original Critters was actually inspired by classic monster movies from the 1950s, and taking one look at the actual plot of this movie, that becomes so much more apparent than any Gremlins influence you can accuse it of having. This isn't some movie about cute little monsters turning evil because of people people not listening to the warnings. It's a movie about a group of alien convicts escaping from a space prison, landing on Earth, and being hunted by a pair of bounty hunters who are trying to destroy them. And if that small synopsis sounds wild to you, just wait till you actually see what they do with this premise. Speaking of which, let's get into the movie itself, shall we? Critters opens with a shot of the aforementioned space prison holding a species of alien known as the Krite, or as we'll come to know them, our titular critters. A voice over the speakers informs us that the Krite have escaped their cell and somehow managed to hijack one of the spaceships on the station, escaping and fleeing to a nearby planet. It is here where we're introduced to easily my two favorite characters in the entire series, our pair of intergalactic bounty hunters, Ugg and Lee. Yes, that is their real names. Now, I know that the critters are the main focus of these movies and they absolutely steal the show when they actually are on screen, but I cannot help but love everything about these bounty hunters. These guys are easily some of the most entertaining characters from any movies I've watched. And while I can't get into the details as to why for now, I'll leave you with this little piece of dialogue that should give you an idea of what these guys are like. Okay,
It's Wonder Man!
Did you hear what that alien just said?
Not really.
He nearly destroyed half of the last planet.
He said, try to be less destructive this time. Last time you nearly destroyed half the planet before they cut it off.
It's a culture of many contrasts.
After meeting our bounty hunters and seeing them embark on their journey, we're met with our main cast of characters, a good old classic nuclear family living on a farm in the middle of nowhere. Our family consists of Sally, a bratty teenager who's always fighting with her brother, Brad, a young boy who likes to build actual bombs in his bedroom, Helen, a mother who was hilariously played by Dee Wallace, the same actress who played a similar role in E.T., a much more friendly movie about aliens coming to Earth, and finally, Jay, our father figure who says the most insanely out-of-pocket things to his children, and a character that David Barron was absolutely insistent looked like Bruce Campbell.
Thread.
Miss that bus, I'm gonna skin you and hang your bones out to dry.
Yeah, shit
What the
like
fuck
that!
kind of threat was that?
That's what I mean!
kind of threat
Okay,
was that?
Leatherface, calm down!
That's what I mean whenever I
You
say
missed
that
that bus,
dad
I'm
in
gonna
this.
flay you.
Like, the dad says the most out of pocket. You missed that bus. I'm going to skin you and hang your bones to dry.
Skin you
Oh,
and hang
Dad,
your
you're
bones
so
out to dry.
silly. Please don't eat me.
Who's
Steve?
That looks like Bruce Campbell
That
at
guy.
home. But I'm not wrong. He looks like Bruce Campbell at home. I feel like the camera's gonna zoom in on his face. He's gonna say gravy or something.
Her life.
Great.
What the fuck? He literally looks like Bruce Campbell, though.
Will you
Dad, I asked to speak.
give me those?
Why does he look so much like him?
As well as being introduced to our lovely little family that we follow throughout the movie, we're also introduced to both the town sheriff as well as our village idiot trope for the movie, a drunk by the name of Charlie who seems to be convinced that the fillings in his teeth warn him of an alien presence. Now, in most of these kinds of movies, characters like Charlie tend to either be a one-off character or a recurring character who's killed off in one of the sequels. But I'm telling you right now that you better get used to this guy, because you and I are about to go on an adventure with him once this series properly gets going, I promise you that. Anyways, after all the introductions are said and done, we're met again with our two bounty hunters now choosing disguises for themselves when they arrive on Earth. Ugg decides to take the form of a fictional rock star named Johnny Steele of all things, transforming in a genuinely really cool sequence which looks to have been achieved by reversing footage of a melting wax head. Our other bounty hunter, Lee, seems to struggle with choosing a form, constantly changing their appearance throughout the movie. Going back to our family, we see the first glimpses of critter activity, with Jay and Brad discovering the mutilated carcasses of their livestock out in the field. They suspect that something is out there, and that suspicion is immediately validated in the very next scene when we see a cop have the most over-the-top reaction on the planet when one of the critters rolls out in front of his car.
Radar? My
Okay,
detector radar thing is
that
out off the
was-
charts.
That was way too much of an overreaction. What did man just do?
You saw a fucking tumbleweed and just immediately
I
broke
know.
his car.
After this is when we get our first proper encounters with the critters in the movie, getting to see them in all their goofy glory. Jay goes down into the basement and is attacked by our first group of them, with them falling out of the ceiling and biting at him from under the stairs. We get to see that they have the unique ability to shoot these poisonous darts, which they absolutely obliterate Jay with before he's able to finally escape from the shed. Meanwhile, during all of that chaos, we cut to Sally, who went to the family barn to make out with her boyfriend before they too are attacked by the critters. They panic and run around while her boyfriend is killed in the goofiest way I've ever seen before Rad shows up with an actual pipe bomb he made, and this happens.
It'll be really funny.
Yeah, I'm so happy.
Wow.
Yummy.
What's you gonna do? What did you feed me?
Oh.
Oh, these effects are immaculate.
Oh, damn.
It's after this scene that Critters really begins to shine to me, because it's after this point that we get the structure that the movie starts to follow for pretty much the rest of its runtime. That being the constant swapping between our family trying to survive against the critter invasion and the bounty hunters on Earth trying to actually find them. Anytime that we aren't focused on the critters and the shenanigans that they get up to, we instead get to watch the actual menaces to society that Ugg and Lee are. Like, these guys are supposed to be the good guys of this movie, but I swear to God, sometimes they're straight up worse than the critters are. If you don't believe me, just take a look at the first thing these guys do once they get their hands on a proper vehicle to drive. We get this wholesome scene of a bunch of churchgoers praying to God and seeing to one another, and suddenly for no reason, these guys just drive through the fucking wall and proceed to shoot the pastor after shape-shifting to look like him. Like, these people weren't doing anything, and these two maniacs just roll in and kill a bunch of them. And if you thought that was bad, literally the next scene these two show up for has them walking into a bowling alley and straight up shooting up the place the moment nobody wants to tell them where the Krite are. This was what I meant when I said that these two were the highlight of the movie for me. Every single time they're on screen, something batshit insane happens, and 9 times out of 10 it is completely unprovoked. I was never ready for this when I originally sat down to watch this movie, but my God, am I all for it. And that's not to say that the critters themselves aren't entertaining when they're on screen either, because I love every second that we get to spend with those little bastards too. The critters have this very distinct personality to them where they seem like they're trying so insanely hard to be threatening and scary, but they just come off as either being really goofy or downright adorable. Like, these guys roll at people like tumbleweeds of death, and everyone in the movie treats it like they're the most horrifying thing on the planet, but I can't help but laugh every time I see it. It gets funnier too once they have to actually climb stairs, because you always just see them struggling so much to even get up a single step with their little stubby limbs. And of course, the actual writing of the movie has this sense of humor to it that also makes every scene with these guys a genuine blast to watch.
What?
Oh shit.
The critters are just such fun monsters, and I feel like that's owed a lot to both the movie's writing as well as the fact that they were created by the Chiodo brothers, who may be my favorite special effects artists of all time. These were the same guys who created Killer Clowns from Outer Space, and you can tell with the way that the critters actually look. These guys just have a knack for creating some of the most fun alien designs I've seen, and Critters is one of the best examples of that. All jokes aside with how goofy they seem, the actual puppetry done for the Krite was really cool to see in this movie. You of course get to see all the little ones running around and wreaking havoc, but because the critters actually grow as they eat, we also get to see some larger puppets created later on, as well as there even being a massive costume used near the end. The different kinds of puppets used throughout the movie allowed for some really memorable shots that really showcase how creative the Chiodo brothers are with their effects. The Krite have awesome designs and work behind them despite how simple they seem at first glance, and I absolutely love them as monsters for that. Anyways, after all the chaos from both the critters and the bounty hunters reach their climax, the two separate storylines finally converge at the end as Ugg and Lee encounter Brad on the road, who leads them to where the critters have been attacking. They show up, kill a bunch of critters in the most over-the-top ways they can, and most of them escape alongside the massive critter who kidnaps Sally. The final showdown happens inside the Krite's ship, with Brad going alone to save his sister and Charlie showing up because his dental fillings led him Hold on. Wait a minute. Earlier in the movie, it's made pretty clear that Charlie's fillings aren't actually talking to him and he's crazy. They made a point of showing us that. But In this scene, he arrives at the exact spot that the critters actually went to, and we're told it's because his dental fillings led him there. So, does that mean... it doesn't matter, let's continue. So Brad makes his way to the ship, saving Sally and leaving one of his trusty pipe bombs there by accident. Charlie manages to throw a Molotov at the ship that lights the pipe bomb, the Krite take off and blow up the family's house for shits and giggles, and then the pipe bomb explodes and the day is saved. Kind of. Because you see, this is one of the other things about Critters that's really weird to me. This movie actually has 2 different endings based on where you watched it. In the theatrical release of the movie, the bounty hunters give Brad a device which allows him to rebuild his house, giving us a happy ending that we'd all expect. But the film's DVD release actually has an alternate ending where the bounty hunters don't do shit for the family and just fly away, leaving their house in shambles. Now, I will say that the sequels take the better ending of the 2 into account, so when we discuss this film later, that will be the one that I talk about. Even then though, it feels weird having to clarify what the canon ending of a movie is. I'm used to that with games, but I feel like I've never seen that with a film franchise other than this one and Evil Dead. Anyways, Critters ends with our bounty hunters returning to space while being followed by Charlie, who begs to come with them. And as the family happily goes back to their newly reconstructed home, we get a glimpse of some eggs that were left behind before the critters were destroyed, teasing one of the several sequels to come. And that was Critters. As you can probably tell now, this movie is pure chaos. The premise is ridiculous, the behind the scenes is even crazier, and overall it's one of my absolute favorite watches. I know I said that this movie was something I only originally watched because of Gremlins, but honestly after experiencing it that first time, I found myself genuinely liking it more. Not to say it was a better movie at all, just one I have an insane amount of fun with. It's cheesy, the effects and the characters are goofy, and the more I learn about what went into it, the more fascinated I am by it. After this movie, I was extremely eager to experience what the rest of the series had to offer, and the next one absolutely delivered when it comes to what made this one so special. So let's take a look at that next. After the absurd amount of success the original movie got, it only made sense that a sequel would soon follow. Critters 2 was released only 2 years after the original film, and for this one the director and producer sought out to make it even bigger and better than the first one was. This film had double the budget of the original, it had more chaos, more of our bounty hunter shenanigans, more critters, and the special effects were greatly improved from what we saw before, as shown in this hilarious behind the scenes clip I was able to find while doing my research.
Excuse me. Well, in spite of some people's shenanigans, I had a great time. As a matter of fact, I'm actually looking forward to seeing Critters 2. You guys, would you knock it off? Look, the only reason this is scary to an audience is because they can't see what's outside the frame. But look, I can tell you there's no monsters over here, there's no monsters over there, so... And besides, the monsters always come at you from behind. And look, no monsters anywhere. So if you could just... Oh!
Despite all of this work that went into it though, Critters 2 wasn't even close to being the success that the original film was. Not even being able to make back its budget at the box office and being torn to shreds by critics. Which is really unfortunate because I enjoyed this movie just as much, if not more, than the original. It's just got a little bit of everything that makes Critters so fun and a bit more, so I don't know why it was treated so much worse than its predecessors on release. Actually getting into the movie itself, Critters 2 begins with us once again following our 2 bounty hunters, or 3 bounty hunters? Yeah, so remember how the first movie ended with Charlie running off with Ugg and Lee asking for them to take him with them? Turns out they actually did and have spent the last 2 years traveling around in space with him, training him to become a bounty hunter himself. Which is like, really oddly wholesome in my opinion. I don't know, I just find their whole bromance really endearing and I find it hilarious that they subverted my expectations of them just leaving Charlie on Earth like everyone else. Anyways, wholesome alien bromance aside, the 3 bounty hunters receive a message from what I assume is supposed to be the same alien from the first movie, who tells them that the Krite have once again been detected on Earth, forcing them to fly back to deal with them once and for all. It is then that we return to Earth and see what's become of those eggs, still unhatched and sitting inside the barn. There is noticeably more than last time, and this pair of random guys in a truck show up to sell them cause I guess it's almost Easter? Wait, this is an Easter movie?
We're gonna use them in the egg hunt, and then we're gonna get crittered.
Oh, that's why it's an Easter horror movie!
Oh my god.
Because they bring the critters' eggs to an Easter egg hunt!
I will give it that. That's kind of funny.
That is really
Right, look,
good.
it's-
Yeah, so Critters 2 is randomly an Easter movie about townsfolk using alien eggs as their Easter eggs, which is so out of left field that I kind of adore it, especially with how we see this idea explored throughout the movie. Speaking of which, we're slowly introduced to our cast of characters leading to the town's big Easter event. We're met with a new character, Megan, whose food service with the most disturbing looking human I have ever seen is interrupted by one of the guys who bought the eggs from earlier hitting on her, until good old bomb-making Brad shows up to defend her. He promptly gets his ass kicked, and Megan drives away with him in a scene that is framed as if he's being kidnapped.
Get run over.
Where did he go?
He was kidnapped.
The two of them talk on their car ride about how over the last 2 years, everyone in the town had started to believe Brad was crazy because of the events of the first movie. Over that time, the constant bullying he experienced led to him simply saying that the critters were never real, moving on with his life and trying to get over it. Anyways, Brad was right and the critters are very real because in the very next scene we see one of the guys who picked up the eggs heating them up, allowing them to hatch and introducing us to the baby critters! Oh my god, look at them!
No, puppy!
Baby critters! Baby critters!
Oh my god, there's so many!
Perfect line.
After the death of the farm owner, the critters' antics really start to get going as more of the eggs are left around town for the Easter egg hunt, with most of them being left at the town's church. And it's as we get to this point in the movie that I would love to point out the fact that the Critters movies have this strange obsession with bringing back the most random jokes and tropes. Like, this is the second time in a row that we see a church full of innocent people get broken into by aliens in one of these movies. I don't know what the producers of these films have against churches, but this happens so oddly often. And if you thought that being a recurring thing in this series is weird, then how about the fact that the same bowling joke is made in almost every single movie in the entire series? Like seriously, the first movie had this joke where the bounty hunters go bowling for no reason before they shoot up the place. The second one has a bit where a critter runs into a group of people with bowling pin sound effects, and a similar joke is made again when we get to the third one. Like, I would get if these were recurring things in the series because of them being notable moments in the original. Hell, the church scene was one of the funniest scenes in the movie, but stuff like the constant bowling jokes? Was anyone bringing up the bowling scene as the most standout moment in the original movie? I don't know, maybe I'm just thinking too hard about this, but it was something I noticed by the time I got to the third film, and I just really needed to point this out because it confuses the hell out of me. Anyways, moving on, the critters begin wreaking havoc at the church when they kill the poor town sheriff in a horrible manner after I made two of the funniest jokes of all time, which really had the entire VC laughing. They're so cute! Oh my god, Vanny!
Holy!
Oh my god, FNAF ruined?
That's what the
He's
doctor
front roll. Go into his crotch.
D test.
That was like 4 of them jumping into his
What you
crotch!
should be asking is, did you?
Problem.
Spring lock failure.
Back, I hope you die.
After the death of our new sheriff, Brad and Megan try convincing the old sheriff to come back and help the town fight off the new critter infestation, to which he does jack shit and hightails it out of town. This leaves only one group of people to fight against the critters, our good old bounty hunters who immediately get to work the moment they arrive on Earth. They kick down the door to some cafe where the critters are participating in their goofy tomfoolery, and then they proceed to kill almost all of them in the most brutal way imaginable. Like, I get that the critters are the bad guys of the movie and all, but this scene plays out like we're supposed to be scared for them. We've got critters blowing up and screaming in horror, one poor soul gets thrown in a fucking deep fryer, and the entire time there are actual cartoon sound effects playing over the whole thing like it's supposed to be funny. Whoa!
Oh my god. Oh my god, he got hit with the boing.
He got boy.
I don't know if this scene is supposed to make me laugh or cry, but whatever the intention was, I am certainly not gonna forget it for a while. Some of the critters are able to escape the onslaught that the bounty hunters bring about, forcing them to begin pursuit and allowing for Lee to shapeshift into the most disturbing looking human I've ever seen.
The only
What was
character.
the deflating sound?
Oh, he's hideous.
Give me your glasses, nerd. Gotcha, nerd.
No more crates.
He runs around for a bit in this form, scaring everyone in the VC and myself more than any critter has, until eventually he tries to transform into a significantly more tame and friendly looking form.
Oh god, oh god.
Robert England! Please, Robert England!
The directors of this film couldn't exactly afford Robert England for this new form, however, so Charlie gives Lee the option of turning back into the form they were using through the majority of the film and were saved from the most disturbing looking human I've ever seen. What we are not saved from, however, is the critters, because in the very next scene, poor Lee ends up meeting their untimely demise as they're ambushed by the critters and killed off screen in what was genuinely a pretty upsetting scene for me to watch. Like, I know this is the goofy alien movie, but seeing Ugg's genuine pained reaction which reverts him back to his true form was actually pretty damn sad. Was the first and only time in any of these movies where a character death actually affected me in some way, shape, or form. Rest in peace, Lee, you will be missed. After the death of Lee, Charlie and Ugg reconvene with the rest of the town as they all come together to try and create a plan to destroy the critters once and for all. Brad and Megan join them, and our old sheriff decides to actually get off his ass and do something after what may be the dumbest chase scene I have ever watched.
What was that?
Where are you going?
Oh my god, what are you doing?
Kill the child. Kill the child. Kill the child.
Oh my! How much work?
Death
Oh,
has
there's
come
multiple.
back.
Okay, there's multiple.
Brad is the one who ends up coming up with the plan they use to destroy the critters, and his plan is the most Brad thing the writers could come up with. He suggests they blow the critters up by luring them to a meat processing plant that they rig with a shit ton of explosives. And everyone is immediately on board with this because I guess nobody could think of anything better. So we get a big montage of all the townsfolk coming together, throwing frozen food around and poorly hiding bombs in every little nook and cranny they can find. The critters pick up the scent, and at first it seems like it won't be enough to lure them away from the townsfolk, but this bigger critter than the rest convinces them to take the bait cause, quote,
There's a better meal over yonder.
Cheeseburger!
Cheeseburger.
No bowl!
That is correct. Cheeseburgers do not have bones.
and so the day is presumably saved by the power of boneless meat. The critters make it to the plant. It turns out the big critter was actually Ugg, who shapeshifted to trick the critters into taking the bait, and the explosives go off, killing all the critters once and for all. Or so it seems, because as it turns out, the explosives quite literally didn't do shit. And it's here where we're finally introduced to my favorite thing these movies ever came up with, the critter ball.
Oh my god!
It's a meatball.
Critter ball.
Critter ball! How did that happen?
Yeah, so I guess the critters just got sick of everyone's shit, because for the climax of this movie, they just decided to fuse together into one giant wrecking ball of death that just begins destroying the town and everyone in its path. And this thing is in equal parts hilarious as it is terrifying, because we get these moments where the critter ball rolls over some poor civilians and we are left with some insanely gruesome special effects to show off what is even left of them after the fact. Probably the goriest we will ever see the Critters movies get, and I love it for that. The critter ball aimlessly rolls around the town, killing everyone in its path and seemingly being completely unstoppable until good old Charlie decides to make the sacrifice play, piloting the bounty hunter's spaceship into it and killing all the critters at once in a final blaze of glory. Which, like, you gotta love how the solution to this movie was just blowing them up a second time and somehow that actually worked. Anyways, the day is actually saved this time, and the movie ends with all of our main characters mourning the loss of Charlie. Until it turns out Charlie is fine and he just used his parachute to escape the ship at the last second. Like I told you guys, we and Charlie are gonna be going on an adventure through these movies. There's no way they're getting rid of him in the second movie. The movie actually ends when Ugg goes back to space, leaving Charlie on Earth as the sole protector if the critters ever return, and giving our characters the happily ever after they always wanted. At least until the third movie, but we'll get there when we get there. And that is Critters 2. Like I said, this movie just felt like it had a little bit more of everything that made the first one so enjoyable to me. It had more chaos, more critters, more bounty hunter shenanigans, the effects were greatly improved, and it just felt like it had everything you could possibly want from a sequel. Unfortunately though, the critics and viewers at the time did not share this opinion with me. Like I said at the start of this section, Critters 2 was a massive box office failure, leading to every movie in the series afterwards being direct-to-video and having massive cuts to the budget compared to what we got with this one. Which is really unfortunate, but hey, at least the one that follows this was actually pretty damn entertaining regardless. Speaking of which, I think it's time we take a look at the first of those direct-to-video films with Critters 3. And so we arrive at Critters 3, the movie which to many marked the downfall of the entire series, and honestly I can't exactly disagree. While this entry was a fun time just like the rest, there is a massive dip in quality here that is noticeable almost immediately when we actually start the film. The pacing is a lot slower, with there being very little of substance happening in between the moments where the critters are attacking people. The characters are significantly more boring, with us no longer having our iconic bounty hunters or farm family to follow, and overall the setting of the movie itself is way less interesting as well. See, for this one the director wanted to do what every horror movie franchise when it wants to spice things up by bringing our critters to the big city rather than the small farm town they've become known for, which on its own isn't a horrible idea, but much like movies like Friday the 13th Part 8, which promised us a big city setting, this one kind of lies about that. The entire movie takes place in a single apartment complex that we never leave with the exception of the movie's opening, and this very quickly gets old. With all that said though, there is some genuine fun to be had with this movie still. It has its moments in between the slog that is the rest of the movie, so overall I and everyone else who watched it had a really good time regardless. Actually getting into the film itself, Critters 3 begins by showing us our new cast of characters, a family who's on their way home from a trip when they have to make a pit stop due to a flat tire. When they stop, our main character Annie goes out to play with her younger brother, and we're met with another important character for the movie, Josh, who is played by... Hold on. Wait a minute. Why does this guy look so familiar? Yeah, so it's here where I get to discuss both this film's one claim to fame as well as one of the strangest pieces of trivia about the Critters franchise. This movie was the first movie ever to star Leonardo DiCaprio. When he was in this movie, he was only 16 years old and was just barely getting a start on acting, taking whatever role he could get. And he's also been quoted as saying that this is one of the only films that he genuinely hated being a part of, saying in regards to it, Critters 3 is possibly one of the worst films of all time. I guess it was a good example to look back and make sure it doesn't happen again. So obviously we're starting this film out strong if its one and only claim to fame has that to say about it. Moving forward, our main cast of characters end up losing a frisbee, and when they go looking for it, we're met once again with our good friend Charlie in possibly the weirdest character introduction in this whole series.
I mean, even...
What? I have no idea why he was even out here doing this. My only assumption is that he was looking for critters, but even then that makes no sense because he literally pulls out a crystal that apparently glows green when critters are nearby. Don't ask, I have no idea where that comes from. And it isn't glowing here, so there aren't any critters out here. I don't know, it makes absolutely no sense, and the movie doesn't even try to explain itself. Anyways, Charlie, after exploding from the ground like a Cyberman, immediately becomes our exposition for the movie, recapping all of the events from the first 2 Critters films for some reason, and giving his critter detecting gemstone to Johnny, Annie's brother. It doesn't glow green at this moment, telling us that they are currently safe from the critters. However, in the very next scene, we watch a critter's POV as it lays eggs underneath the family's vehicle. So not only does this gemstone not do the one thing it's supposed to the moment we see it first appear in the movie, but also the critters are just back with literally no explanation. In Critters 2, they made it pretty damn clear that all the critters left on Earth died from the explosion at the end, but I guess we wouldn't have a third one if that happened, so they're just back with no explanation. Our family piles back into their vehicle and drives back to LA, giving us our lovely setting for the rest of the film. From here on, the movie goes by very slowly, with there being very little of substance actually going on in the time it takes for the critters to appear. And I feel like the reason it feels so insanely slow purely boils down to the fact that the bounty hunters are no longer in this movie. In the first 2 Critters films, we had 2 different but equally entertaining perspectives to cut between throughout the whole thing. When we weren't seeing the critters trying to kill people or just fucking around, usually we got to watch the bounty hunters causing just as much havoc in their attempts to destroy them. It made those movies so entertaining because it always felt like something was going on. In this one though, without the bounty hunters present, it just feels like the writers didn't really know what to do in the downtime between the moments where the critters are active, so we just end up following these poorly acted side characters as they move from boring set piece to boring set piece, slowly but surely setting up the moments where the critters actually appear. Speaking of which, for a while we follow around this annoying worker at the apartment complex, listening to him mock every person he sees and seeing that he was purposely letting rats loose in the building, until eventually he has a run-in with our first group of critters. A fight breaks out, with the critters attempting to bite at his throat and him fighting back, leading to them letting out the most guttural human screams I have ever heard a small alien creature make.
That is a big crit. Why is he so big?
Oh. That is just like a grown man screaming. It then cuts away for a moment to show us Leonardo DiCaprio driving to the complex alongside his stepfather, who is apparently the landlord, before immediately cutting back to the critters as they attack yet another resident of the apartment complex in what may be one of the worst acted scenes I have ever watched in my life. Standing there awkwardly.
Can't get him. What is it on the jump cuts? What's it on the jump cuts?
This resident looks to be dead for sure until Annie arrives to save the day, beating the shit out of one poor critter with a mop and running, getting the both of them away. As they climb back up the stairs, the critters follow them, which leads to the 3rd bowling joke in a row, further proving my point about these movies and their weird obsession with the most random tropes on the planet. It's also during this scene that all the characters get shot with the critters' poison darts, which randomly in this movie have the added effect of making all the characters act super loopy for no reason. Like in the prior films, all these things did was paralyze people for a short time, but with this one, they now make them act like how a kid thinks drunk people act for the sake of comedy, I guess? I suppose it's a bit silly of me to expect good continuity in a direct-to-video sequel to Critters of all things, but details like this just end up confusing me to the point where I feel like I have to bring them up for my own sanity. Anyways, the landlord and Leonardo DiCaprio end up arriving to evict the people living in the complex, cutting the power for some reason, and going upstairs to see where all the people are. The two of them end up getting into a fight, which ends with Leonardo DiCaprio wishing his stepdad would just die. He immediately gets what he asked for as the critters trap him alone in a room to eat him, and he's saved before meeting the same fate. During this time, one of the residents shoves a flare down a critter's mouth, leading to his scorched body falling down a laundry chute and lighting the apartment complex on fire. Nobody notices this yet, however, so we find ourselves moving into the attic where pretty much the entire movie takes place for the rest of its runtime. From here, we constantly cut between our main cast of characters creating whatever plans they can to escape, and the critters participating in all the same chaos we've come to know them for. And although I said earlier that most of the scenes focused on the main characters become quite boring, there were some really standout moments here that were admittedly hilarious to watch.
Please don't die.
And then a critter pops up like,
No.
Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
Oh, this poor woman.
And of course, even when the movie has its slow moments with the main cast, the critters themselves are always entertaining no matter how pointless the scenes with them can be.
They're so cute.
Really.
The trick fucking soap.
Bleached eyes.
No, don't eat that!
Yes.
Are they gonna kiss?
Oh no.
He loves the
Zach,
Drink
let
the
him
soap.
drink the soap.
Drink
What is
the
your
soap.
problem?
He's gonna keel over any minute now.
Bro, the bottle literally says,
He's dead. Well, he's dead. What the fuck? Stop it. Stop it.
Stop! You can't clean it off, you can't see! We continue to follow this back and forth structure for a while until the movie picks up again after Charlie returns, following this random moment where a critter just starts screaming at the top of its lungs for an ungodly amount of time. He kicks the door down to the apartment, killing every critter he sees until his gun jams, forcing him to hide away in the attic with everyone else. They fend off some more critters, a hole is blown in the ceiling, and after a final confrontation with the critters' leader for the movie, the day is saved once again and all the critters are destroyed for good. Or at least we think so for a bit. There is a fourth movie after all. The final scene of the movie has us following Charlie into the basement of the apartment complex, pointing his gun around looking for any remaining critters, all the while the credits play over the scene in the most annoying way I've ever seen a movie include them.
What is the credits?
What?
That is the stupidest
awful.
credits ever.
Holy shit, that was awful.
Yep, there we go!
Oh my god.
Yeah, I knew it.
This is the
Oh my
worst
God,
way I've
this
ever
is
seen
beautiful.
credits be done.
What are you talking about? I love this.
Actually awful.
It's gonna keep going, I assume.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah, it has to. Eventually, he finds 2 critter eggs that were left behind inside the washing machine. But before he can destroy them, he receives a call from our good old buddy Ugg. Ugg tells him that those 2 eggs are the last remaining eggs for the entire critter species somehow, and that destroying them would cause them to go completely extinct. For this reason, he is prohibited from destroying them, instead being required to place them in a drop pod that was sent to Earth to collect them to preserve the species. The drop pod comes through the ceiling behind Charlie, ending the movie with a cliffhanger that teases Critters 4. And that was Critters 3. This film was absolutely worse than the original 2 in many different ways. It lacked a lot of the charm those films had while trying to give us something different, leading to a film that was boring at its worst and just stupid at its best. That being said though, I still had a really good time with Critters 3. It had plenty of moments that were absolutely hilarious to watch despite the dip in quality. And it felt like while this one was unnecessary, it still had a lot of the heart that made the original 2 Critters movies fun in the first place. I definitely think it deserves better than the pathetic 0% it has on Rotten Tomatoes. It ain't good, but it's a really fun time for people who love the first 2 movies like me. The same cannot be said, however, for the absolute shit show that is Critters 4. So let's talk about that next, shall we? Critters 4 is one of the worst movies I have ever watched, and it is by a wide margin. While the other movies in this series had their issues, they were still a ridiculous amount of fun to watch despite that. This one is not. In fact, this one is a downright miserable experience. You'd think that this being the Critters movie about them going to space would make it one of those so bad it's good kind of movies. Something that you know is objectively horrible, but it's so over the top that you have a great time regardless. That is not the case. This movie somehow manages to be so insanely boring that I actually had to force myself to finish it for the sake of this video. It has none of the qualities present in the first 3 that made them fun at all. The critters barely ever show up in their own movie. The bounty hunters are once again missing for the majority of the runtime, and the characters we're stuck with are so one-note and emotionless that I genuinely think I would rather watch paint dry than have to see them ever again. Even when things do happen in this movie, they end up being so lackluster compared to what we got in the previous movies that it doesn't feel worth it at all. It is a horrible experience from start to finish, and by the time we got to the end of it, the entire mood of our VC was actually ruined.
That was an experience.
I hate that. That was the worst thing ever.
It was meh.
Maybe the worst thing ever.
I have a personal
meh.
vendetta against everyone
That
who worked
movie
on
should
this
have been
movie.
called No Space for Critters, because there was nothing there.
No space for
Actually getting into the plot of Critters 4, the movie starts with the exact same scene that Critters 3 ended with. This both happens as a way to recap the previous movie for those who didn't see it, but also because Critters 3 and 4 were actually shot at the same time as one another, with both films being released only 1 year apart. The scene continues after the point where it gets cut off in the third movie, showing us how Charlie attempts to put the eggs in a cryo chamber only to get trapped in there himself, causing him to go to space and giving us the plot of our movie. Or so you would think, because we don't end up seeing Charlie or these critters again until almost a full hour into the movie. Instead of focusing on them, we are instead subjected to a time skip to the year 2045, where we're met with our new cast of characters that we follow through the entirety of this movie. Our cast of characters include this annoying kid who's always complaining about something or getting abused by the crew for literally no reason, the crew's captain who is a sleazy asshole for the sake of being a sleazy asshole, this guy who I could tell you literally nothing about, the one lady on the crew who is the one and only character I even like a little bit, and... wait, is that Brad Dourif? That is Brad Dourif! Oh my god, how did they manage to get fucking Chucky to be a part of this movie? By this point in time, there were already 3 Child's Play movies. How the hell did they manage to get this guy on a direct-to-video Critters sequel set in space? He wasn't even the highest billed actor either. Don Keith Opper, the guy who played Charlie, was the one they paid the most to even be in this movie. I genuinely cannot wrap my head around what this poor guy is even doing here. Anyways, Brad Dourif plays the unhinged co-pilot of the crew, constantly losing his temper and letting his Chucky out every single time he does. Still dressed like they're in the early 90s.
To at least pretend a bit of servitude.
Just like you.
I can't not hear Chucky and I hate it.
Our crew is met with a signal coming from the pod carrying the critters and Charlie in it, with them arguing about whether or not they should pick it up before getting a call from our good buddy Ugg, or as he goes by in this new movie,
It's the latest in. It's the latest in cryptocurrency.
What was his name? What was his fucking name?
Wait, I didn't catch his name.
Go back to his name. Right here.
Do I have the honor of speaking to Captain Richard Buttram?
Oh my god.
Captain.
That's so stupid.
This man's name is Buttram.
That's so stupid.
Buttram informs the crew that they will be paid top dollar if they can retrieve the pod and deliver the specimens to him, and so they agree and touch down on an abandoned space station to do exactly that. And it is here where jack shit happens for the next half an hour. We spend this whole time just watching these guys bicker among themselves constantly. There are useless scenes of forced character drama. We get to watch the captain being an absolute sleaze, and the characters other than that just wander around aimlessly questioning why the space station was abandoned in the first place. The plot only picks up once the pod is finally cut open 38 minutes into the movie, after which our captain is killed by a baby critter in an admittedly pretty cool death scene, and Charlie is freed alongside them. The critters then just piss off right after this, and we don't get to see them again until we're a full hour into the movie. During this time, our characters walk around and bicker some more, also finding out in the process that the space station they're on was one where scientists were experimenting with the forced evolution of alien species. Hearing that, you may assume that the movie plans on doing something with that, potentially exploring it by having the critters evolve into some kind of new species or monster we'd never seen before. And you'd be wrong, because this plot point has almost no consequences on the story at all. The only thing we see it get used for is when the critters use the machine to make their eggs hatch faster, but even after that, there are only like 3 critters that actually appear and do stuff in this entire movie. This machine feels like such a forced plot point for the sake of justifying the sci-fi setting, and I absolutely hate it. There were any number of ways this could have been used to at least do something new and entertaining, but it was utilized in the most boring, bare bones way imaginable, which honestly I just feel describes this entire movie in a nutshell. Anyways, after that exposition, the critters kill another guy and the crew starts planning out their escape before good old Ugg appears alongside a pair of stormtroopers, which is actually what they're called in this movie, by the way, and he demands they be given the Kret eggs or die. Cause yeah, if you didn't think this movie couldn't get any worse, they just decided right at the end to turn Ugg into some evil corporate entity with no personality or redeemable traits anymore, committing complete character assassination to my favorite character in the series. Now, I know that the characters in the Critters movies aren't exactly the thing everyone watches them for, but this pissed me off more than anything else this movie did because I actually loved the dynamic the bounty hunters, and more specifically Ugg and Charlie, had. There was something so endearing and entertaining about this cold, ruthless bounty hunter being absolute bros with this random guy he met on Earth, and that friendship was part of what made the second movie so fun to me. Here, he is completely stripped of all that personality and charm, being turned into a boring, one-note villain that is nothing like what he used to be. Fortunately, we don't have to spend too much time with this bastardized version of Ugg, as Charlie shoots him in the head following a final fight between the crew, the stormtroopers, and the critters, leading us to the end of our movie. The movie ends properly with Charlie hopping on a spaceship, pressing a random button, and jumping into hyperspace. And so, that is Critters 4, a horrible end to what was a very enjoyable series before it. I had so much less to say about this one because this movie has literally nothing going on that's even worth talking about other than the things that piss me off. It is filled to the brim with the slowest, most agonizing scenes to watch that just felt like they were included to artificially inflate the movie's runtime. If Critters 3 was lacking due to it not having the bounty hunters present to balance out the scenes with the critters, then this movie has nothing because the critters appear like 3 times in total over the course of an hour and a half. And when this movie actually attempts to tell a story, it never works, because it's either done by it being told through the most boring characters on the planet, or by bastardizing characters from previous movies to the point where they aren't even recognizable anymore. I hate to end this video on a sour note, but I cannot for the life of me pretend that I even remotely enjoyed Critters 4 for even a second. It is one of my least favorite movies I have ever watched, and I am sorely disappointed by it. And so we find ourselves at the end of our little critter-themed adventure. Despite the fact that the final movie we talked about today left such a sour taste in my mouth, I still overall loved this series. Critters is just the embodiment of everything I love about corny horror movies from the 80s and 90s. Even at its lower points, with the exception of 4, the movies are just so insanely entertaining that I don't care about their faults. And I found learning about the behind the scenes of these films just as, if not more entertaining than the movies themselves. We all had a wonderful time exploring Critters, and I hope that by making this video, you did too. It's always really fun for me to just go off about one of my hyperfixations, regardless of how relevant it may be to what people are talking about nowadays on here, or even what I normally discuss. If you made it this far into the video, then thank you for watching. It means the world to me that you stuck through with me through this whole thing, and I hope to see you in whatever my next project ends up being. Goodbye for now.
Oh, Astra, I'm here for the movies. Oh, I just cannot wait to finally get to watch Critters with you and all your lovely friends. They are my favorite movies, and I have waited oh so long to finally share them with you. Wait a minute. Are you recording your outro? Did you watch the movies without me?
Oh my god, no, Lankman, look, I can explain, it's not what you think.
You let me out of your movie night again? Why, Astro, why? You know how much I love those movies. You promised we'd see them together.
Look, I know, and I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Is there anything I can do to make it up to you?
No, Astra, you can't. Unless you can go back in time to watch the Critters movies again, there is nothing you could do to make me feel better.
Oh, come on, there's gotta be something I can do. Hell, maybe there's something we missed. Maybe there were some Critters movies we didn't bother watching.
No, Astra, I don't think there is. Surely nobody bothered picking up the Critters movies after the disaster that was Critters 4. That would be ridiculous, let alone a TV show about them. I mean, who would ever want to watch